Week 12 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 36 running backs. I'm ranking this week number 1, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. So another great season for Christian McCaffrey. He's putting up huge numbers, receiving out of the backfield, finding the end zone. And this week here in a matchup at a familiar foe in the division at the Seattle Seahawks. Rush defense isn't all that great. I think McCaffrey once again goes out there and has a great game. Number 2, Austin Ekeler. Los Angeles Chargers. Austin Ekeler, he's been a solid running back throughout his career with this Los Angeles Charger team. I know injuries have been a concern for him this season and throughout his career. And last week, he only had 6 fantasy points, including a crucial fumble at the goal line. But usually you don't see Ekeler have 2 bad games in a row. So this week in a must-win ball game for this Charger team versus a tough Baltimore Raven team coming to town, I think Ekeler bounces back and has a huge performance. Number 3, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara, we know he's a solid running back, one of the better receiving backs out of the backfield. And coming off a bye week, refreshing up a little bit and a good matchup at the Atlanta Falcons, a team he's owned throughout his NFL career. Once again, I think Kamara is a stud running back this season. He's really turned things around, and he's getting a lot of dump-offs and running in between the tackles. Number 4, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's been a solid season for Travis Etienne. Last week, I know he didn't do much, but it was the Trevor Lawrence game with 2 rushing touchdowns, which obviously took production away from Etienne, and Lawrence threw for 2 more touchdowns as well. But this week, I think it's ground and pound. It's a great division matchup with the Houston Texans, 2 up-and-coming young teams in this league. And once again, I think Etienne bounces back. Number 5, Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley last week, a monster performance, and him and Tommy DeVito were hooking up in the passing game. And Barkley broke a few big runs as well versus one of the worst defenses in the league in the Commanders. So this week, a decent matchup versus the Patriots. They're going to lean heavily, I believe, on Saquon Barkley. And he's still got that game-breaking speed, and he's playing for a contract. So we know Barkley's going to want to finish off the season great. And with a great matchup this week, we saw Barkley looks healthy and still an elite running back. Number 6, DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Swift, he had a great game on Monday Night Football, the Super Bowl rematch in Week 11. And right now, with better matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, where their run defense isn't all that great. We saw a Jet team with a banged-up offensive line and a bad quarterback in there in Zach Wilson, with Breece Hall having a solid game. So this week, DeAndre Swift, I think, once again goes out there and has a good game. The tough test was the Kansas City Chiefs, and obviously he passed it with over 20 fantasy points in PPR leagues. So this week, once again, Swift has a big performance. Number 7, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. So Gibbs, he's finally playing up to expectations after the Lions have given him more of a workload, and they're making Gibbs work in space more, where he's obviously an elusive back and already one of the best receiving backs in his rookie season in the NFL. So this week here, Thanksgiving game, kick off the week, early afternoon, I think Gibbs has a good game in the division matchup versus the Green Bay Packers. And he's got home run ability each and every time he touches the football. Number 8, Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. If you would have said coming into the season that by week 12, Mostert would be a top 5 running back in fantasy points, I wouldn't think that's true, but that's been the case this season for Mostert. I know running back, a lot of busts, a lot of underperforming and injured players, but Mostert's going out there each and every week and putting in solid performances. So this week here, in a decent matchup with the New York Jets. I know the Jets defense is great against the pass, but versus the run, you can find running lanes and make plays. And on Black Friday, I think we're going to see Raheem Mostert have a good game. And David Kane, I don't think he's going to play in this one as well with the short week. So more work for Mostert once again. Number 9, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So Jonathan Taylor, he's having a bounce back last few games after he got off to a slow start. And obviously, he missed the first few weeks of the season before his contract was resolved, but now coming off a bye week, refreshed and back in the playbook and stuff. And now with Gardner Minshew obviously in their quarterback, they're going to be running the football even more, even though it was him and Moore splitting the carries for the most part. I think Taylor's going to get 85%, 90% of the touches. So this week here with a good matchup versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers that have been getting shredded on the ground over the last few weeks. He's number 9. Number 10, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. So believe it or not, Robinson's a top 10 running back as well in fantasy points this season. I know this week it's a tougher matchup at the Dallas Cowboys, where the game could get out of hand, where they're going to have to abandon the run. But the last few weeks, Brian Robinson's been a solid receiver out of the backfield, including a 100-yard game catching the football. So this week at Dallas, Thanksgiving game, it's going to be a tough one, no doubt about it, for this Commander team. But Robinson's shown he's a versatile back and pretty much could do it all with Antonio Gibson banged up, missing last week's game, and he's getting the majority of the workload. Number 11, Rashad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So White, it's been a great month of the season with 17 or more fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. And this week here, good matchup indoors at the Indianapolis Colts, where they're bend but no break type of defense. But Baker Mayfield, a lot of nice checkoffs to Rashad White. White last season had a monster year, over 50 catches in his rookie season. And once again this year, he's putting up top 10 production over the last month. So this week in a good matchup at Indianapolis, it wouldn't be surprising if he hits that 17-point mark. Once again, number 12, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Breece Hall, we know he's an explosive back. Jets finally make a quarterback change going from Zach Wilson to Tim Boyle, even though I don't know if it's going to make much of a difference. But it can't hurt, to be honest. You can't get any worse than Zach Wilson has. So maybe you could open things up a little bit here for Breece Hall. We know he could catch the football out of the backfield. We know he could block, and he's a 3-down back. And Dalvin Cook pretty much was a waste of a signing. So this week here in a game versus Miami, where they got to put points on the board if they want to keep up with them, I think Breece Hall is going to be a big part of this offense all around. Number 13, Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. I know Henry the last 2 weeks, he's pretty much been non-existent, combining for only 9 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But this week here, a good matchup versus the Carolina Panthers that give up the second most fantasy points to running backs on the season. I know Henry, he's hitting that wall where running backs break apart at 28, 29 years old. But this week here with a good matchup, and we know Henry at the end of the season, it seems like he gets stronger and better. Like I said, he definitely could be on the decline, but this week with a good matchup, I think he puts in good numbers and a solid game. Number 14, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Stevenson, one of the better receiving backs out of the backfield. This week here, pretty good matchup at the New York Giants. We saw Brian Robinson last week erupt in that one out of the backfield catching the football. And I think Stevenson, if it's Bailey Zapp and Mac Jones, they're going to have to rely heavily on him, because I believe this is going to be a close game between these two teams. So Stevenson, he's been a solid back for the majority of the season. Catching the football is a big part of it as well. And I like him this week. Number 15, Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. So Pollard finally found the end zone last week for the first time since week 1. And this week here, good matchup versus the Commanders that just get shredded on the ground all season. One of the worst defenses in the league. And we saw Saquon Barkley last week go off for a monster game, over 25 fantasy points. So this week, I think Pollard once again, solid RB2 for fantasy owners. 16, Josh Jacobs, the Vegas Raiders. So Josh Jacobs, he's been struggling over the last couple weeks here, not really hitting the running lanes and not really finding a lot of space or even catching the football out of the backfield. So last week, this Raider team had a chance to beat the Dolphins, but they couldn't get the job done passing the football a lot. This week, definitely a tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But we did see DeAndre Swift have a good game versus them. But this week, Josh Jacobs, once again, he's in that RB2 range. Number 17, Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco, we know he's one of the physical running backs in the league. We know he takes it at 100% each and every down he touches the football. And this week here, a good matchup at the Vegas Raiders, where I think there'll be running lanes. We've seen running backs have good success this season. And this Chief team, if they're up early and often and have to run the football out in the second half, with Pacheco being the closer, and there's no competition in that backfield. Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't been getting the football at all this season. McKinnon's barely been in there. So as a solid RB2, he's great each and every week. 18, Devin Singletary of the Houston Texans. So Devin Singletary, he's been a great running back over the last couple weeks, getting a monster workload. We don't know if Dameon Pierce is going to return in this football game here for the Texans. But to be honest, I think Pierce should be a running back touching the football 5-10 times at most. Singletary taking the workload the last couple weeks. They won both ball games in Week 10 at Cincinnati. And then last week in a ball game, it was a tough one versus Arizona, surprisingly, but they won that one. And this week here with a good matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they're not great versus the run. I think Singletary once again has a good game, and that workload's been great. Number 19, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So the numbers have definitely haven't been up to where people thought Robinson would be this season. Most people thought Robinson, his numbers will be where Jahmyr Gibbs coming off out of college into his rookie season, but pretty much it hasn't been the case, and it's not 100% Bijan Robinson's fault. They're not getting him the football enough. Arthur Smith, he's been reluctant to just let Robinson get 20, 25 carries per game. And now they're going back to Desmond Ridder, which hurts this offense, in my opinion, as a whole, where at least Taylor Heineke is a gunslinger and could stretch the field. So this weekend, a tougher matchup versus the New Orleans Saints. Once again, I don't think Robinson has been an elite running back this season, and he's been a number 2 back for the most part. Number 20, David Montgomery the Detroit Lions. So Montgomery, we know he missed a few weeks from week 6 to week 8. And that's where Jahmyr Gibbs really took over and become the top back over there in Detroit. But Montgomery, he's still getting a healthy workload. He's found the end zone in the last 2 weeks as well, which is always a great sign. And this week here in a potential shootout between rivals on Thanksgiving with the Packers coming to town, I think Montgomery, once again, he's still going to get his 15, 18 touches per game. And it's been a nice two-back system over there for Detroit. 21, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. So Kyren Williams back in action after 4 games. He missed on IR. And Kyren Williams, he was on some tear to start the season before the injury, putting up elite number 1 running back numbers. This week here, a good matchup at Arizona. I think Williams, he's going to come back into a nice workload, 15, 20 touches. And they need some more consistency at the running back position. Like I said, Henderson had some good games, but yards per carry wise, him and Royce Freeman weren't really doing much. So this week, if it's full go for Kyren Williams, he's a solid number 2 running back to ease him back in for this Los Angeles Ram team. 22, Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, this Cincinnati Bengal team, everyone's going to take a hit with Joe Burrow out for the season with the wrist injury. Joe Mixon, we know, is a physical running back, good in between the tackles, no competition there. But this week, what a tough matchup, and Joe Burrow out of the lineup at best. He's a number 2 back for owners. Number 23, Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. Gus Edwards, a physical running back, but a running back that's been a touchdown-dependent RB this season. If he's not scoring a touchdown, he's pretty much scoring 4 or 5 fantasy points, maxing out. But he's had 7 touchdowns in the last 5 games, is Gus Edwards, and already 10 touchdowns on the season. So right now, he's getting the goal line opportunities. He's getting the short yardage, and he's got a knack for the end zone, no doubt about it. But Keaton Mitchell, I believe he's going to get more work as the week goes on. And Gus Edwards, he's only getting 10, 13 touches per game as well. I know it's a good matchup at the Chargers, but right now something's got to give, I believe. And these touchdowns, numbers are going to go down. Number 24, Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. Jerome Ford's been a great fill-in for Nick Chubb this season. And this week, a great matchup at the Denver Broncos that give up the most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So Ford, he's had home run ability. He can catch the football out of the backfield. And now with Robinson in there, quarterback, the rookie, they're going to rely on the run like they did between Ford and Hunt last week as well. 25, Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. So Charbonnet's going to get his time to shine because I believe in the short week here. This is the Thursday night game for Thanksgiving. I don't think Kenneth Walker with the oblique strain is going to turn it around and play in this one. So Charbonnet, he's a physical running back, 2nd round pick in the draft this season, and he could catch the football as well out of the backfield. So this week here, he's going to get, I believe, 75-80% of the touches. McIntosh and DJ Dallas are the other running backs over there for Seattle. But this week, Charbonnet, it's his opportunity, and I think he'll be a decent fringe 2-back flex option. 26, Jalen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So pretty much Warren last week, he had 11 touches total, and him and Najee Harris 50-50 split now over there for the Steelers team. So if he didn't have that 74-yard run, it was pretty much a pedestrian day for Jalen Warren. But he's another running back that's explosive, good pass catcher out of the backfield. And this week here in a tough division, grinded out game at Cincinnati. I don't think he's going to go for 130 yards on the ground with a touchdown, but definitely still decent numbers, I believe. 27, James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. James Conner, he's been a solid running back over the last few seasons, but now with Kyler Murray in there as well, Murray's going to take his shots and run the football when he wants to, and especially in the goal line as well. So this week with a tougher matchup at the Rams, where their defense has been pretty decent this season versus the run, I don't see Conner doing much. He's pretty much a touchdown-dependent type of running back. His receiving yards have gone down this season and catches, and he's not 100% as well coming off injury over the last couple weeks. Still has to get his legs under him. 28, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So Cook last week, he had a great game, no doubt about it. Buffalo's got a tough matchup at Philly. That's one of the best run defenses in the league versus the run. And James Cook, he's been up and down this season. And last week, we saw this Buffalo Bill team versus the New York Jets use 3 running backs. They had Cook obviously being the lead back. Latavius Murray short yardage and got work. And even Ty Johnson found the end zone in that game as well. So this week here with a tough matchup and every running back getting an opportunity, I think Cook doesn't do what he does last week. 29, A.J. Dillon of the Green Bay Packers. So it looks like Aaron Jones is going to be out on the short week here. They're playing the first game on Thanksgiving. When Dillon, he's had opportunity this season where he's had the workload, but really hasn't taken that opportunity and had big games out of it, was A.J. Dillon. So this week here in a tougher matchup at the Lions that are one of the better running defenses in the league, I have him at 29-30. Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. So Williams, he had a few week span where he was playing great football and putting up solid numbers. But last week, a pedestrian game, only 7.5 fantasy points. And this week here, a tough matchup versus the Browns. They give up the least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. So right now, we know this team's pretty much built on dump-off passes and feeding Cortland Sutton and underneath routes here. So if this game, they can't find running lanes. Javonte Williams, he doesn't do enough out of the backfield catching the football, where they got Jaleel McLaughlin and Samaje Perine for that. So right now, Williams, he's had his most success this season, where Denver's been playing with a lead. So this week here in a matchup where I think this game's going to be close between these two teams. I just don't think Williams is going to find a lot of running lanes versus this solid defense of the Browns. 31, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So right now, 50-50 split pretty much between him and Jalen Warren. Warren outplayed Harris by a mile in last week's game. And Harris, like I've been saying all season, the pop really hasn't been there. The burst hasn't been there. And I know his rookie season he put up a monster year, but for the most part, he's a fringe number 2 running back at this point is Najee Harris. 32, Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. So Ty Chandler, he was impressive to me last week in that matchup with the Broncos on Sunday Night Football, where he had 10 carries, 73 yards, and he added some receiving work as well. So Chandler, a better receiver out of the backfield than Madison, and he just looks like the more elusive and quicker back as well. So this week here in a matchup with the Bears coming to town on Monday Night Football, I think Chandler is going to have the better game between him and Madison. 33, Alexander Madison of the Minnesota Vikings. So Madison, he still had a healthy workload with 18 carries in last week's ball game, and a good matchup, no doubt about it, this week versus Chicago. But pretty much him and Ty Chandler, it's a 50-50 split, with Chandler being a more explosive back and the receiving back. So right now, if Madison pretty much don't find the end zone, he's not really going to bring fantasy value, I believe. 34, Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. So Jerome Ford's outplayed Kareem Hunt, no doubt about it, this season. Kareem Hunt, he's been a solid veteran to still have in the locker room and make some plays at time, but if he's not scoring a touchdown as well, Kareem Hunt pretty much hasn't had fantasy value this season. So this week he does have a great matchup at the Broncos, give up the most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But right now, like I said, if he's not scoring a touchdown, his Hunt, he's pretty much not showing production. 35, Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears. So it looks like Foreman's possibly going to miss this game. He left in Week 11 with the ankle injury was Foreman at Detroit. And now Khalil Herbert, he came back and he looked rusty, and he has to get his legs on the rim as well. But he did have 16 carries in the game. So this week he had a decent matchup in Minnesota. But with everyone on the slate, and Herbert still not 100% in my opinion, I don't expect a big game out of him. And 36, Chuba Hubbard to round out the list of the Carolina Panthers. So last week this Panther team did find some run lanes versus the Dallas Cowboys, but obviously got blown out still 33-10. But Hubbard and Sanders were a decent 1-2 combo this week. They versus a tougher run defense, believe it or not, at Tennessee. Even though we know Tennessee, you could pass on them all games. So I think this is going to be a game where it's going to be a little bit tough sledding for Hubbard and Miles Sanders. But obviously Hubbard's still a starting running back, decent receiver out of the backfield, and he'll crack the 36th and final spot. So that's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.